So before we start, I just want to take a moment and mention our sponsor and thank them. GSM are a domestic and international freight forwarder operating in many sectors across our industry and in particular in the cannabis sector, hence their role today. So headquartered out of Toronto, employing about 800 plus people, and if I may say so, a fantastic partner to deal with from a business perspective. So we'll move on to the main presentation now. So there'll be a brief team introduction. I'll do a quick cannabis industry overview, and then I'll do a little bit on some of the supply chain and operational opportunities that we see. Then there'll be a very interesting piece coming up from our regulatory and compliance individual who's presenting today. And then recruiting in this challenging industry will also be covered. And then we're going to have GSM come in and talk to us a little bit about their experiences from being on the inside. And then at the end, as discussed, we'll have the open forum. So presenters today, myself, Senior Vice President, Operations at Auxly, Vlad Klakar, who's our VP of Regulatory Affairs and Compliance at Auxly, Marina Pizanyuk, who is our Manager of People and Culture at Auxly, and Brian Potvin, who is the Managing Director of GSM. So I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a flavour in terms of Auxly and what we're about. So we have a number of facilities across Canada. We have a facility in Ontario here, CoLab, which is up in Canada, close to Ottawa. And it's really our pre-roll operation and dried flower packaging. Out in Nova Scotia, we have another operation that is our high quality premium cultivation site for the growth of flower. We then have DoseCan, which is really the heartbeat of our operation. It's 60,000 square foot, and it does all of our 2.0 products. So it does extraction, oils, chocolates, gummies, vapes. It's GMP compliant, and it's really the jewel in the crown. And it's a facility we're very, very proud of in terms of its standards and also the production and the quality that comes out of that. Sunens is another facility we have, which is just going through the process of ramping up down in Leamington. It's a joint venture, and it's been built and designed with a local partner there who has extensive experience in greenhousing. It's very state-of-the-art. It's probably one of the most state-of-the-art facilities in the world, and it's something that we're very proud of. We have a fifth facility that isn't on here, but it's interesting in that it's KGK Science, and it's our research and development lab, which is based out of London, Ontario. How do we in Auxly approach it? Every cannabis company has a slightly different approach, I think, and we tend to look at it through a portfolio approach. So DoseCan is really our medical brand, if you like. CoLab is kind of the cool cannabis enthusiast, pre-rolls, dried flowers. The vapes, chocolates, and candy are done out at the DoseCan facility. Back 40 is a new venture for us, and it's kind of the price-sensitive cannabis enthusiast. It's been a very successful brand for us since we launched it a little while ago. 4A is one of our longer-standing ones, brands, and we do vapes, soft chews, chocolate, and candy. And again, they're all produced out of the DoseCan facility in PEI. And then Robinson's, we like to think that it's for the connoisseurs. It's very premium, very high quality dried flower that we recently launched into the market and sort of towards the tail end of 2020. And again, very successful, has a very, very large following of connoisseurs who speak very highly about it. So to talk a little bit about the category for those that aren't close to cannabis, bear in mind we've only been legalized for a couple of years now. And in that couple of years, we've seen the category grow to a little over 2.5 billion in 2020. So off that, if you look to the right in the pie chart, you'll see that flower is still the majority of that. And if you look at all the various breakdowns there, we play, and Auxly we play in most of those categories. Not all of them, but most of them. And I think something that stands to our reputation as a business is that in Q4 just passed, we were #1 in national vape sales with a 23% market share. So again, that you know, we pride ourselves on the fact that we're We didn't go with the mantra of biggest, fastest first. We went with best quality, what's right for the customer, what's right for our consumers. And that's something that we're seeing in the feedback from the various panels that we get feedback from, and it's all about quality. And that's where we pride ourselves, and that's where we'll continue to go as a business. So in terms of operational and supply chain opportunities, I've been in the industry about 4 years now, previously with another company in our sector, one of the large players. And I've heard a number of times people say there's no rear view mirror, there's no precedent. I'm one of the guys that kind of maybe bucks the trend a little bit on that and says actually there is. Because cannabis is CPG. Is it regulated? Absolutely. But there are so many other CPG and similar industries that have similar regulations that we should be learning from and we should be piggybacking onto. So if you look at things like shared warehousing, there's always a desire to go build your own warehouse and try and be your own master. 3PL shared storage with some segregation is an absolute opportunity that we as an industry should be looking at more. Fulfillment centers built within those that do secondary packaging, excise, stamping, picking and packing, white labeling support, co-packing. And again, I'll let Vlad talk to it when he gets there. These are all things that on the surface, and if you use we can't do that because it's cannabis and it's regulated, that's a myth that's now being dispelled, and it's becoming more and more open to be able to do this. Now you got to do it in a controlled method. You've got to be very methodical about how you go through it, but there are ways to do this. It's the same with the opportunity of setting up secure cannabis networks across Canada. So similar origins. Most of the LPs are all based in very similar areas. We mostly, apart from 1 or 2 provinces, go to the same provincial distribution centers. So it does actually make for the potential to come up with some great transport synergies. And there's the opportunity to look into at-source manufacturing transport synergies. So planning solutions for global freight movement. Again, a lot of the 2.0 products call for raw materials that come from many, many different parts of the world, including here in North America, but also Asia and some other areas. So, we're an industry that again, is in its maturing stages. But look, we definitely have opportunities to look at different planning solutions for global freight movement, and GTA GSM have been an excellent partner with us in that, and it's something we look to expand on. So in the early days, and again, bear in mind, I was in the industry a little bit before recreational legalization, and there would have been a kind of perception that it was very cumbersome and very cost prohibitive to get in, and perhaps it was because, again, I think people were using the regulations and the compliance needs in order to create this cumbersome approach. Secure facilities are needed. I don't think we need Alcatraz. They have to have controlled access. They have to have camera coverage. And the interesting thing is that all-around perimeter fencing is not required. Many of the early facilities that I managed in the industry were surrounded with, high fencing, with wire on it, with cameras everywhere. That's all a little bit subjective now, and there's actually, again, Vlad can maybe talk a little bit better to it, but there are ways to do things and secure the building without going that far and incurring that much cost. Secure transport, like I said, it exists in many areas already today. Pharma, technology, tobacco, alcohol. We are really just an extension of those different types of industries that already are working off secure networks and secure facilities and heavily regulated. Of course, one of the big things that we have to do in our side of the industry is robust tracking of information for loads. We actually have to track everything from the seed through to it gets to the province, and then the province are responsible for all of the tracking thereon. But again, there's a lot of tracking, but it's just, again, no different to what happens in some of our other industries. So again, it's just trying to dispel that myth that it's this deep blue ocean that people can't play in. It's not that at all. I think then, there's the integrity of transport environment is increasing with the 2.0 expansion. So by that, I mean temperature control for both outbound and returns. So if you look chocolate, chews, etc., need to be within a certain temperature band, and that needs to be maintained both on the outbound and any inbound chain. And then the availability of the data. So we need to be able to give that data back to provinces or customers if there's any queries. So it's all about getting temp tails and understanding, the leg of the journey, and if there were any discrepancies in any of the integrity of those requirements. So I think in summary, for me, I think there's a lot of transport companies out there who could be part of this incredible opportunity, and it's going to grow. It's 2.5 billion after 2 years, and there are still many more products to come and many more barriers to be broken down. Ontario is in the process of opening many more stores, which will open up more opportunities. So, I think from a logistician point of view, I would encourage people in the industry to start looking outside and thinking, how can we come in here? What do we need to do to be part of this exciting industry? So to just give you a flavor of that, if you look at ourselves in Auxly, if you refer back to my comment about cannabis is CPG, if you look at the skill sets of our management team, we have purposely went out and built a management team that has a very wide breadth of experience. But you'll see in there a number of very, very well-known CPG businesses: Diageo, Highliner Foods, Pepsi, Philip Morris, Shoppers, Nestle. So that's really, we think, one of the strengths that we've built here in Auxly, is that we have embraced that CPG mentality, and that's how we think of ourselves. We're a CPG company. Our business was built and founded by 4 of the most recognized and with the highest accolades lawyers who set up a lot of the early cannabis companies. So we're built on a sound regulatory and compliance platform. That is something that is at the absolute core of our business and will never change. But around that, we've built a team of CPG specialists, both in sales and operations. And that's how we feel we'll move forward and be successful. And I think that's why we've been successful in our first year of operation in 2020. So I'm going to hand over now on that note to Vlad Klakar, who was one of the founding 4. So Vlad, feel free to take over.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody, for attending this webinar today. We're very excited to walk through this presentation and tell you a little bit about our sector, our experiences, and where we believe the sector is going. So generally in these presentations, I like to start with talking about kind of how this all came to be. And I think it's important to know the foundation for how this was built, to really help people understand really how this industry operates and what the opportunity is. So in 2016, the federal government appointed a federal task force to advise the ministers on the development of the cannabis framework in Canada. And this task force was comprised of a lot of prominent politicians at that time, scientists, industry experts, and they went far and wide, really across Canada. They reviewed something like 30,000 submissions. They spoke with youth advocacy groups, they spoke with mental health groups, they spoke with public health groups, with police forces, with municipalities, with people that use cannabis for medical purposes, with people that want to use cannabis for non-medical purposes. They went to the US, to jurisdictions that had legalized cannabis. They went to jurisdictions like Uruguay, who at that time was the only country that had a cannabis regime at the federal level. And they put this report together, and this report to this day, 4 years later, still embodies the objectives of how our industry operates. And some of the principles they put in here really speak to minimizing the harms of use for cannabis, establishing a safe and responsible supply chain, enforcing public health and safety, providing medical access, and implementing the cannabis regime swiftly and efficiently. Next slide, Alan, please. So out of this report, we get the Cannabis Act. And the Cannabis Act really sets out the federal responsibilities and delegates some duties down to the provinces. So at a very high level here, the federal responsibilities here govern how cannabis is produced and who can produce cannabis and what they can produce. We have very specific rules on what type of cannabis can be sold, how products are packaged and labeled, how much THC can be put into a product, what ingredients we can use, really our manufacturing practices, which in our sector are referred to as good production practices, a little different than industries like pharma that carry good manufacturing practices, or agriculture that carries good agricultural practices. And as Alan spoke about, one of the critical requirements and objectives of the Cannabis Act, and that's implemented heavily through the regulations, is the tracking from seed to sale and the prevention of cannabis into the illicit market. So one of the main objectives and responsibilities on license holders is to ensure that they know where their cannabis is at all times, and to prevent any instances where cannabis could be diverted from the regulated industry into the illicit market. And we also abide by very, very strict promotional regulations and rules. So when you think about the cannabis industry, a lot of our promotional requirements are based on the tobacco advertising regime. So that is very different than how alcohol is advertised in our country, and generally how narcotics are advertised. So, you know, you can kind of think back to when was the last time you saw a tobacco advertisement, right? It's very limited in scope. It's tobacco. It's in certain instances where minors can't see it, or publications to name adults. You can't really advertise cannabis on big billboards like you can for alcohol and certain other substances. Generally, the provinces have been given the power to really control the retail of cannabis and set things like what's the minimum age of consumption, and set some rules around where cannabis can and can't be consumed, and also whether or not you can grow cannabis at home. Next slide, Alan. Thank you. So when we talk about the cannabis regulations, this is really where all of our key requirements come from for how we operate our businesses. Our primary regulator is Health Canada. They're the ones that we have to get all of our authorizations from. They are the ones that inspect our facilities, and they're the ones that have the power to put our businesses into trouble by removing our licenses if we don't comply with the regulations. The regulations are very interesting in that they're not prescriptive per se. So the regulations, for example, on transport, I'll use that as an example, they don't tell us how exactly we need to move goods and what type of logistics we need to follow, what type of security level we need to reach. They're more objective oriented, meaning they tell us that we need to ensure that our products are transported in a manner that preserves their quality, and in a manner where we have control over the products and we do not lose them. So how we achieve that is really up to us. The great benefit of a regulatory framework like this is that it allows for innovation, and it allows for companies to find different ways in complying. I've tried to list here some of the key requirements that come from our regulations. So obviously how we get licenses and how we keep licenses, how goods are moved in and out of the country, which is still very limited. There's been a little bit of export of cannabis outside of Canada, but there's been no real import into the country. There are pretty strict security clearance requirements, so any of the key roles within any of the facilities must be vetted through an RCMP security check. We do have pretty stern requirements on how the buildings are protected and how alarms are monitored and how buildings are designed. Good production practice is a really hot topic. Again, Health Canada's intention here is to make sure that the products we put out into the market are quality controlled and meet a certain standard. That's where GPP really comes in. Part of that is how cannabis is tested. So we need to ensure that when somebody picks up one of our products and it says 10 milligrams of THC on it, that is consistent time and time again. Packaging and labeling, very strict. And of course, like I talked about, promotion. record keeping critical, and this is one thing that keeps our supply chain moving, and is one hot topic that we need to always pay attention to avoid things like theft, avoid instances of loss. All of these have to be explained to Health Canada anytime they occur. Next slide, Alan. So here I'll quickly walk you through how licensing works at a very high level. So there's various classes of licenses that are created under the Cannabis Act. There's licenses for cultivation. They both come in a standard size, so you want to cultivate on a large scale, or a micro size if you want to cultivate a very, very small operation. And there's also nurseries if your objective is only to start cannabis genetics and kind of propagations. Once we go beyond cultivation, so processing, we get into processing activities. So picture this is extracting cannabis plants into distillates and resins, or manufacturing final products like vapes, edibles, capsules. The license classes in this bucket are also broken between standard size and micro size. There is a special license for selling for medical purposes. So this is when you sell directly to medical patients that have a medical script. There are licenses for testing, so if you want to be an analytical lab, and there's a research license if you're just intending to do R&D. Sorry, Alan, you can go back to that one for a second. So right now, and one of the points I wanted to make here is some of these licenses, they can be stacked one on top of another. So our main facility, Dosecan, has a license to process, they have a license to do testing, and they have a license to do research. So when we put the slide together, there was 576 licenses. I checked this morning and there are actually 581. So it's already out of date. Health Canada continues to license new entities, and people are continuing to apply for new licenses. At this time, a lot of these licenses are standard, but there are a couple of hundred that are micro class. And as you can imagine here, all of the logistics that are required to move cannabis between these sites, there is a significant amount of B2B transfers between facilities. So we purchase input material from many different sites in order to extract it and make products. And then when we ship our finished goods, there is a limited number of drop points. So in this instance, we, for example, might take material in from various sites across the country, but our endpoints are limited in that we deliver products to the provinces. And it's the province that is the distribution center. And from that point, they take the material in, verify what we've sent, and then pass it on along to the retail levels. And that's really it for me here, Alan. I think the next one we can go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about what we've learned in terms of recruiting, and I'm going to hand over to Marina.
Thanks, Alan. I'll just be reviewing some of our recruiting challenges in the cannabis industry and what we're doing to mitigate those challenges. So firstly, there's a lack of precedence in the industry. So while other industries have precedence in total compensation and can make decisions based off of best practices and historical data, we in the cannabis industry have this once in a lifetime opportunity to create everything from the ground up. While this is great on one hand, on the other hand, creating jobs, job roles, descriptions, responsibilities, compensation benchmarking, it's all created with very little guidance from the market. Another challenge we have is that as the legal industry is fairly new, there are not many candidates that will have relevant experience. So we have to come to an understanding with our teams when we're recruiting on what soft skills are most important, and then try to narrow down what the ideal candidate looks like based off of that information. As our industry is in a constant state of change with shifting public opinions, laws, and licensing requirements, never a dull moment, which is always fun. But the volatility makes it very difficult for some companies to find enough stability to make progressive hiring decisions. One regulatory revision can require a company to pivot its branding, product line, sometimes even an entire market strategy from top to bottom. So this shift in strategy can mean that there's a shift in employee requirements and skill sets. So if someone's hired for one thing, there is a shift. We have to have them pivot and work on something completely different. This instability tends to be unappealing to some candidates who are accustomed to well-established and structured cultures and workspaces. Another challenge that we have is a lack of working capital. So with the market demands continuing to rise, having the right people in the right places is vital to remain competitive, but obviously hiring costs money. Everything from recruiting, advertising, and interviewing requires not only working capital, but also people who are qualified to do those jobs. Unfortunately, obtaining and securing capital can grow and hire can be very, very difficult. As a number of industry players are startups, obviously they have limited financial resources, making the wrong hiring decisions can be very costly. And one of our other challenges in the cannabis recruiting industry right now is the recruiting platforms. As I mentioned, perceptions are changing, but misconceptions about the industry are still pervasive, which means that lingering market stigma presents a challenge for cannabis staffing. Many mainstream recruiting platforms are unwilling to partner with us as cannabis companies. A lot of them are based out of the US. A lot of these big tech companies are in the US, and they're limited by their state laws and working with cannabis companies. Fortunately, this is also changing, and we have some relatively new platforms coming into play that want to be part of the cannabis space. There's a lot of up and coming Canadian companies as well, which is very, very exciting. Some of the ways that we mitigate those challenges is to look at soft skills and hard skills, where we as an employer place a premium on a candidate's adaptability. So while the ground is constantly shifting, one role doesn't expect to remain static. An employee that's hired, again, as I mentioned, in one certain function can be diverted by circumstances to have to shift gears with sometimes very little warning. And also what we're finding now is that there's a natural evolution in skill requirements as our business is starting to mature and the industry is evolving. So those that were originally hired, 3-4 years ago as entrepreneurs, builders, and the risk takers have to pivot their roles now, and they have to concentrate more on regulatory issues or formalizing operational processes and financial reporting to help the business. We also look for synergies in neighboring sectors and regulated industries. So there are sectors with similar skill sets that share familiar features with cannabis. So industries like alcohol, food and beverage, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and production and distribution of CPG are all really great places for us to recruit from. And then any jobs that are related to regulatory compliance, we look for candidates with experience in setting up policies, SOPs, compliance protocols that are in other regulated and licensed industries. So while there are many aspects of many positive and attractive aspects of working with us and in this new and emerging market, anybody that is seeking excitement and growth, advancement, it's really hard to beat the cannabis sector. I think we have this all within this space, but not all cannabis companies are created equal. So one can't assume that what's true in company A will be true in company B. So when we're engaging with candidates, we need to ensure and stress to the candidate what makes us unique. Why are we different from the next company? So while this may turn away some candidates, the ones that want to succeed and will succeed in our type of an environment will not shy away from this challenge. So to piggyback off of that though, transparency into the role and into the company is also, it just has to come through during the interview process. So a lot of employers are not as open in providing candidates with an honest insight into their company and role expectations. We try to provide sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly, as this will be an honest reflection of our company, our culture, and the role. But it also allows you as the candidate to self-eliminate yourself from the process if you don't think that you're a good fit for a company like ours. The onus here is also on you as the candidate. If you're in an interview and you hear something that doesn't really sit well with you, perhaps it's a red flag or it's different from the environment that you like to work in or an environment that you could potentially be successful in, the onus is on you to ask probing questions that will help you to understand things a little bit better and see if the company is a good fit for you. One of the last ways you overcome our challenges in recruiting in this space is to be creative in the process. So obviously in the absence of clear market for candidates, there isn't just, we can't just pick from other cannabis companies at all times. Talent professionals and recruiters take a proactive approach by organizing corporate events, attending conferences, engaging in social media. Some of these items have obviously been made a little bit more challenging with COVID, but excitement about the industry is still pretty big and the buzz is still pretty high. So, appearing in the market not only helps us locate talent, but also builds credibility for our brand and our brand awareness. So who are we? And that strong candidates will gravitate towards us for opportunities. Alan, you can flip the slide. Thank you. So this is specific to us as we recruit for Auxly and all of our subsidiaries. I think most cannabis companies are aligned with similar recruiting practices, but I'll just speak on behalf of us. So what we look for in a candidate is we do focus on quantifiable data on resumes. So when you are presenting a resume to a recruiter or you're applying for a role, don't just list your roles and responsibilities. Typically, a recruiter that is good at their job will know what your job description is based off of job title. So this is your opportunity to focus on achievements and accomplishments. So for example, add in a project that you want to highlight that you've worked on. What was the objective of the project? How were you involved? Were the results achieved? Were they not? Why didn't they? What have you learned? What would you do differently moving forward? Were there any efficiencies? Was there money saved? Did you bring in money? These are the type of things that we look for when we say quantifiable data. And it's important to recognize transferable skills, again, in an industry that doesn't have many benchmarks. So as previously mentioned, with the lack of precedence and relevant experience, we are looking for experience that you have gained elsewhere, but that could be relevant and needed in cannabis. So again, highlight your collaboration, your resourcefulness and initiative. These are all easy words to just put on a resume. They're good buzzwords, but truly dive deep into what these mean for you and in particular moments in your job history. So when did you collaborate with someone? What kind of initiative did you take? And what was the impact of the project? You know, if you ran out of known resources, how did you find more? And again, what was the final impact here? It goes without saying that obviously in a highly regulated industry, we also need employees that have high attention to detail and quality. So point out a time when you may have spotted a mistake in a project that could have potentially cost the company money or not just meant to be monetary, but how else could it have cost the company? Maybe it's, brand issues. Like, how did you mitigate these types of issues? I've said it a couple of times already, but I can repeat it again. I think this is a wild industry, and it takes a lot more than skill to succeed. What you need to succeed is passion for the industry. And this doesn't mean that you have to be an avid cannabis consumer, but it does mean that we're looking for that inner drive, the fire that's inside of you, the passion, essentially an intrinsic need to want to make a positive impact on our communities. Again, it's an emerging and ever-changing industry. So the people that will succeed within our space are going to be ones that are comfortable working in gray space with limited direction that may pivot daily, sometimes more than daily, depending. And there's an openness to learning and genuine curiosity that we look for. You don't know what you don't know. And the more you expand your reach and your circle, and the more you interact with people outside of your own little silo, it'll give you additional knowledge and make you more successful. And the last piece is showcasing that you have knowledge on the industry and the company. That's always, always a plus. Our records are public. You can read our financials. You can look at our news, what's up and coming. But don't just come into an interview and regurgitate this information. Come into an interview prepared to actually have conversations about some of these things and have probing questions prepared. And just in closing, yes, growing pains are part of this industry and those are expected. One of the ways that we overcome them time and time again is by applying strategies that are proven to work in other spaces, regardless of the industry. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to Brian Potvin at GTA GSM. I'd just like to preface this by saying, on behalf of Auxly, we've been working with GTA GSM for most of 2020, and I got to tell you, they've been an incredible partner. I don't like to use the term supplier. They've been an incredible partner for us. Brian and his team have consistently gone over and above and beyond to make sure that we're getting benefits, we're getting value. They're working with us all the time on new initiatives. So really looking forward to this part of the presentation. And Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. Good day, everybody. Thank you for joining. And how dare the U.S. inauguration take place at the same time as our conference. But just want to get through who we are as a group. We have great customers. Auxly is foremost in there, and we have tremendous partners as well. A lot of our partners are the ones that are doing the work for us in the background, and our job is to utilize our team, our highly specialized team, who take a lot of pride in what they do to coordinate everything for all these moves, which, as mentioned earlier, there's no real regulations that were set in place. Our guidance comes from you. And so we're a group of 800 plus employees based in Toronto. Vancouver is opening as well as we speak. We've taken with our partners at Tech Dynamics an approach to bring technology to the industry, which was lacking. I'm sure most of you can imagine working off the back of an Excel spreadsheet to manage your transportation needs. And this is something that's evolving, and the industry, because there wasn't a lot of preparation time on the shipping aspect of the business, it was the last maybe to be taken into consideration. Between this, we've used partners like Bolloré. We've used them to move shipments into all parts of the world, and this has been a huge benefit to have somebody who's so strong in so many countries, who understand the regulations and are willing to get involved to make sure that your shipments are not held up at customs, because you take such pride to grow, to produce at such a high level, to be GMP certified or whatever the case may be, to then have it held up because you misdeclared the shipping route or whatever the case was on that one. And we've also worked with them and other partners as well to deliver about 600,000 clones. And this is one that takes a lot of preparation. The funny side story is the first one we did was our very first cannabis move, and we received a phone call asking us to move over 100,000 clones at one time. So instead of wondering who we were going to use, we called the RCMP first to wonder if it was even legal, because this was prior to legalization, and then work backwards from there. But with a devoted team like we have, it's certainly feasible. And these are some of the challenging things that we've been able to do, but work with our partners and be successful. Next one. So the current struggles that we see, at least at our side at GSM, is that a lot of the decisions for shipping are made based on, obviously, your POs, your orders at different locations. When you produce small batches and you need to get these out for certain delivery dates, it becomes expensive to run these independent moves. And obviously, if you have 26 skids moving down the road, we can make this very cost effective for people. But the major pain point that we're noticing is a lot of times you're growing maybe on certain cycles and you have certain orders at different locations, and we'll get into the lack of storage facilities where you can hold product that's pre-produced but not labeled for maybe the province. These are things that need to be moved at the time of order, and when you tax excise, you put the excise stamp on it and you need to move it down the road. It's very costly, because some of the costs are the same regardless if you're moving one skid or if you're moving 20. And therefore, this is where we need to find efficiencies in the industry. We'll get into the LTL, but our favorite ones that we see, some of the myths and some of the issues around moving product, is air is always considered to be expensive. And if you're moving one skid down the road and you're not willing to partake in an LTL environment, you're going to find that flying it is going to be a lot cheaper than running an exclusive truck from the East Coast of Canada to the West Coast. There's also a lot of myths around flying, such as pressurization and products that explode in air. If that's the case, as a former pilot, I would have seen a lot more issues in the past, but the real aspect of it is we all fly or have flown. Your products that are in your bags, they don't typically explode. Yes, there are eventualities, but the vast majority of times, the aircraft takes off in a pressurized controlled manner and lands the same way. So therefore, your product is not going to be exposed to any more of a pressure bump than it would if you're driving across the Rockies to deliver into the West Coast. Another one is temperature and humidity control. We can absolutely control temperature, but humidity is virtually impossible. It's one that you can add certain elements within your packaging to assist in, but there's certainly nothing that we can do from an aircraft perspective or a truck perspective to add humidity to your product and maintain it at that level. So there's ways we can add packaging, but the vehicle itself is going to have a hard time doing this. And the one that we're noticing is that the same way that you're regulated on the inside when you produce, there's not that regulation on the back end to deliver. And we visited multiple sites and they are all impeccable. Every one of yours is different in all ways, but there's varieties of or variations, I would say, in the way that you handle your delivery methods. And the biggest aspect of that is that sometimes the cost of production becomes so high that you need a efficient, cost-effective way to deliver. But that might not be in a vehicle that's been cleaned, that's any sort of food or pharma grade, where your product is produced in those environments, in those extremely clean and sterile environments, and then to move them in a non-sterile environment to final, it almost defeats the process for certain things, especially when it's raw product that may be not fully sealed or clones and such. And these are some of the struggles that we're seeing in the industry. Go ahead. So as we've been talking about, it's really about taking the hints from other industries. We are regulated in a lot of other ways we move product. We're regulated by Transport Canada with our airlines and our airline partners, for our trucking groups as well. But we're not necessarily given a lot of guidance on how to move products. So we've taken it as a leap on our side to bring a standard to the industry where we can. And a lot of this includes technology, as we were mentioning. The availability of these transportation management systems. We have one internally as well that we offer our clients. These are things that can help manage your deliveries. The cost savings that are on the LTL side, we understand that a lot of customers don't want another customer's product backing up at their dock to retrieve product and then move down the road because you're worried about label reading and other aspects and tampering with product. These are things that we've taken as a very high priority internally. We're able to take individual vehicles, go and bring them back to a cross-dock depot, a known facility, or at least a secured facility, and then combine them into loads going to different parts of Canada. By doing so, you get the cost savings, but also you don't have the exposure. The other aspect that you can consider is when you have enough orders for various parts of Canada, is you can also look at doing the full truckload drop shipping. And this is simply done by taking a truck, moving it down the road and doing scheduled stops. Again, not super efficient if we're looking at a scheduled delivery at the government DCs, where the truck may or may not be held up for multiple hours, as I'm sure most of you experienced. But if we can drop it at our secure depots as well and then run exclusives to deliver at a short haul level, then we're offering this benefit to both getting you the long haul done at a more reasonable cost level, and then you're getting your on-time deliveries as well at these government DCs, so that you're not experiencing late fines, you're not getting any nasty emails from any of the different provinces. But as every single one of our clients have expected, and one thing that we're trying to push more and more so is really the tracking aspect, because everybody wants to know where their product is. And there's very cost-effective ways of doing this. We have a partner out of the US who produces our GPS and trackers right now. And for under $10 a pallet, you can get, when you order a certain scale of trackers, you can start to now use a 5G network and track them not only domestically, but internationally as well. So they may board an aircraft or a truck, but essentially we are able to follow the whole transit from door to door. For your insurance needs, for your traceability needs, from your receipt to sale needs, these are all things that you're able to now have as an extra level of security. And they also do temperature tracking as well. So that will add to the benefit. And then it's also just picking the type of equipment that's really needed for the move. Nobody wants a rejected move. Nobody wants a rejected vehicle showing up at their door. So there's obviously facilities that when you bought them or built them, they were either previously a greenhouse, or it was a storage facility, or it was built it was a bespoke built facility for yourself. But then there's does it need a tailgate? Can you accept more than one trailer at a time? Can it back up a 53-foot truck? These are things that on the receiving end or pickup end we need to know. On the aircraft side, an aircraft's an aircraft, except for the fact that we have different types of containers they can fly into. And these can also mitigate temperature excursions, because some of the products are very temperature sensitive. So there are containers, I'm sure you're seeing, for the vaccine that are moving around. These are temperatures or containers that can maintain temperatures within 1 degree Celsius for up to 5 days in some cases. And there's less expensive versions. There's pallet shippers, which are essentially a styrofoam wall pallet, and they have just gel packs inside at either room temperature, the temperature required, to help maintain that along the journey. We can thermal wrap shipments. Again, the exposure is not so much while it's in the vehicle it's being moved in. It's more during the transition periods. If you look at an aircraft and you're sitting on the tarmac and you're looking out the window and your luggage is being loaded, cargo is loaded the same way. And therefore there is an exposure period where it could be sitting outside when it's -20 or +20. And this can affect the product internally. Thermal wrap is a very cheap and efficient solution to be able to protect that product from the quick exposure that you're going to have in these transit periods. The last and best one that we've seen recently is that we have access to a smell-proof bag, and therefore now we can actually go to our LTL partners. And the biggest concern was product smell infiltrating into other products, especially when it's not finished goods. And this was a concern amongst a lot of our partners. We've now been able to approve it on quite a few of our carriers, where if it's wrapped properly in our bags, there is no more smell. And these can now really reduce your transportation costs, because you can now move in an LTL environment, and the trucking firm does not have to worry about their truck being detained at the border, because the border guards or the truck or the dogs were able to smell any cannabis residue. Go ahead, Alan. Perfect. So as mentioned by Alan, Vlad, and the team, the big one for us is pick and pack and storage. The reality is a lot of your facilities are tremendous, but they don't really have that warehouse component to it. And if they do, they're certainly maybe not as big as you'd like them to be, and to be able to host or hold enough of your product. And even at that point, you still have to then pick and package your time on your time and your own staff. You also have to send a dedicated vehicle to come and pick up. If you're able to move these on scheduled runs into a approved 3PL type of facility where you can then add value, put the excise stamp on at the time of sale, put the product onto a co-loaded truck at a neutral third-party facility and move these down the road or by air, you're going to start seeing quite high cost savings, because that's the way the rest of the world is typically moving their product as well. Certainly, we would love to see a little bit more of a standard in the transportation method, so that the partners that are out there that we utilize on a daily basis will continue to be used, but that there's going to be some regulation on using certain ones that are the bottom price fighters, because at the end of the day, sometimes that affects the quality. And insurance, which we'll get into quickly, is a big one that we're able to offer. But I'm not sure if the claims would be paid out on certain modes of transport if they saw how they were moving down the road. The visibility, again, is the major one. Our portal, our proprietary portal, which is built by Tech Dynamics, is fully integrated into different WMSs, ERPs, TMSs. And what we'd love to see is to move these into integrations with the government DCs, and eventually down into the store POSs. The reason being is that because our partner does integrations across multiple platforms, your information flow is going to be much quicker. You're going to have a lot more traceability on your product. You're going to understand the time of sale. You're going to, our side on the transportation side will also start to see orders as they get populated in your, or for your POs when they start coming in. We can start preparing for those transits as well, and start discussing with your transportation teams when is the best time to start moving them for your cost savings that are coming down the road. So these are major aspects that we would love to see move forward, and they are. It's just, as we all said, we started with almost no guidance 2 years ago on how to fulfill on the transportation side, and I think we're gaining a lot of traction, and we're getting a lot of different industry partners that are giving their expertise over time. And the last and not least is the international insurance. The domestic one is available. We offer transportation insurance for both domestic and international now, but the international insurance is one that's still quite a vague topic. And certainly when you're looking at moving larger scale orders into different parts of Europe or Australia or wherever the case may be, it's something that that needs to be looked at, because there's a lot more eventualities for for damage or for anything going wrong with the long.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead there, Brian. Someone just had their mic unmuted.
No problem. So these are the major aspects that we have seen, and certainly things that working with our partners, our insurance companies, our forwarders, and our airlines, that we're able to see definitely some involvement in the industry, and we look forward to see what the future holds.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a few questions in the chat box here that I'd like to just ask to a couple of our presenters. Marina, we had a question to add those to it. And I'd like to just close by, wishing everybody a good day. Stay safe in the current climate, of course. And I hope to see everybody at some point again in the future. And we will be responding to all of the questions in due course. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.